It's time for Recipe of the Day.
As you know, my kids have been cooking a lot more. They're in their teen years. They're learning how to cook. And so I've been trying to put recipes onto my websites that are things that our family really loves, so that as they continue to do this, they'll be able to make those traditional family recipes, which is why my old-fashioned beef stew recipe is now on thecookful.com, and that's what I'm telling you about today. So this is a classic beef stew, as classic as can be. It is what I essentially make when I'm making beef stew without a recipe. Like when I'm just like winging it in the kitchen, this is what I do. Except when I was winging it in the kitchen the last, 5 or 6 times, I made notes, I wrote down the process, got it all written out, and then actually tested that a couple of times to make sure that it was perfect. So this is my beef stew recipe, perfect and delicious, one that I make all the time, and one that my kids will be making in the future, and that you'll be making too. So you are starting with 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour in a bowl, and you're adding 1.5 teaspoons of salt and 3/4 teaspoon of black pepper to that. Mix it up, and then you're going in with your meat. Now, what meat to use? I highly recommend that you do beef chuck and that you cut it yourself into 1-inch pieces. Why? The reason that I choose that over stewing beef, for instance, is that stewing beef is not always the same, not from one store to the next, and not from one day to the next. They put different things in there. You can go and ask the butcher if there is one in your grocery store. If you're at the butcher, ask them what their stewing beef is that day, and if they tell you that it's beef chuck, then go for it. It is perfect. But if they don't know, if there's nobody there, if they don't tell you, I don't think it's worth risking it, because they often just put different cuts of beef in there that aren't perfect for stewing. You really want that well-marbled meat. You don't want anything steak-like. You don't want anything that's not got that marbling in it. It's just going to be dry. A blade roast is a good alternate if you want something else, or a beef brisket. It works as well. So any of the beef brisket cuts is going to work. But that, I think, are your top choices. And I'm saying that because the key to an amazing beef stew is that the meat be meltingly tender, and this recipe gets you that. And the reason it gets you that is it starts with the perfect meat. There are other reasons as well, but that is where we're starting. So you have 2.5 to 3 pounds of ideally beef chuck that you've cut yourself into 1-inch pieces, and just trim off any big gristly fat bits from there. And then you're going to take that meat and toss it with the flour and the pepper, and then shake the pieces off and transfer them to a plate. You're going to have some flour left in the bowl. Leave it there. Do not discard it. We're going to use it later. Okay, so then you're heating 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. I usually use grapeseed oil or vegetable oil, but whatever you like. Heat that up in a large Dutch oven over medium-high heat, and add half of the beef pieces to that. Let them brown well underneath, and then flip them over, brown on the other side, transfer to a plate. Now, if there's not a lot of oil in your pot at this point, often it's been soaked up by the flour and used up. Sometimes some fat comes out of the beef though, and you do have some on the bottom. So if there's not very much oil there, if there's not very much fat there, add another tablespoon. If there is at least a tablespoon or 2, you're good to go. Brown the other half of the beef, browning on one side, flipping over, doing the other side. I'm just gonna say that the browning of the beef does not affect the tenderness in the end. All that it does is affect the flavor. So if you're in a hurry, you can skip this browning step, still do the beef in the flour, but then you're just going to jump right ahead, toss it all into the pot with some oil, stir it a bit, and keep going. You don't have to do the searing step. I know that a lot of people disagree with me about that. I'm just going to say it, of course, improves the flavor if you brown it first, but only a little bit. And it's cooking for so long, and there's so much deliciousness that's coming just from the long cooking process, that the searing is not adding that much. If you don't believe me, go ahead and sear it all. I have done both ways, and they're pretty close to the same. So at this point, either you have seared all of the beef and it's browned and you've transferred it to a plate, or you tossed it with some oil for a moment in the Dutch oven and then transferred it to a plate, you're then going to reduce the heat down to medium. If there's no oil left in the pot, add another tablespoon, and then you're adding 2 medium onions that you've chopped up to there, and you're just going to cook until softened and lightly browned. And I'll just say that the onions release some liquid. So if you have some brownings on the bottom of your pot that you likely will have, you can let the onions cook for a minute and then start kind of scraping the bottom of the pot a little bit, and that's going to bring some of that up. Don't worry if it doesn't bring it all up, because we're going to get that up off of there in a moment anyhow. So you're cooking those onions until softened and lightly browned, 4 or 5 minutes, and then you're adding 3 cloves of minced garlic, the rest of your seasoned flour that you dipped the beef in before, and also a teaspoon of dried thyme. You can do a few sprigs of fresh if you'd like as well. You just have to remember to pull them out before serving. Okay, then you're cooking that and stirring continuously for about 30 seconds, and then you're adding 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And you're going to just spread that all around, like stir it for a moment, and then cook it without stirring for a minute. You're just caramelizing that tomato paste a little bit. We did that with the chili recipe that I told you about recently. Same idea, it just brings in a little bit more depth to the whole dish. Then add in a cup of dry red wine, and you're going to use that to scrape up the brown bits from the bottom of the pot and simmer for 2 or 3 minutes. If you don't want to use red wine, no problem, you don't have to. Instead, use a cup of beef broth, measure the cup into a measuring cup, and to that add a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar and a teaspoon of soy sauce. That's going to give you some of the acidity and some depth from that soy sauce as well. If you don't have soy sauce, you could just do the cup of beef broth with 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar. Okay, so whatever you're using there, wine, beef broth, you pour that in and scrape up the bottom of the pot and then let it simmer for 2 or 3 minutes to just reduce a little bit. Then add that beef back into the pot along with any juices that accumulated on the plate. And you're also adding 4 cups of beef broth and 2 bay leaves to there. Stir that up, bring it up to a gentle simmer. Then partially cover the pot and cook at a very gentle simmer on the stove for 1.5 hours, or you can transfer it still partially covered to a 325-degree Fahrenheit oven, also for 1.5 hours. If the timing works better for you, you can go as far as 2 hours in this step. Nothing's going to change. The next step will be the same as well. And that next step is, after that 1.5 or 2 hours, you are adding in carrots and potatoes. About a half pound of carrots, that's about 4 medium ones that you've peeled and cut into large chunks, or a half pound, that's 8 ounces of the baby carrots that are just ready to go. Drop those into that pot, and 1.5 pounds of potatoes. That's about 3 medium potatoes that you cut into large chunks, or you can use like baby potatoes and then you just pile those right in there. No need to peel them or cut them. Either of those is going to work. So it's 1.5 pounds of potatoes and a half pound of carrots. Add that in, give it a little stir, cover fully, and then continue cooking either on the stove or in the oven until the beef is super tender and the vegetables are soft. It's going to be 1 to 1.5 hours more. And I'm just going to tell you, the beef becoming tender is kind of a weird thing. It gets tough for a long time before it gets tender. So if you taste it and you're like, wait, this has been cooking forever and it is not tender enough yet, what is wrong here? That means it needs to go in for longer. So just put it back in there and let it go. Then you're going to remove the bay leaves once your meat is tender and your vegetables are soft. Taste it, add some salt and pepper to taste if you'd like, and then let the stew rest for a good 10 minutes at least with the lid off before serving. It just thickens up that little bit. If you do want yours even thicker, you can mix together a slurry of cornstarch and water. So that would be 3 tablespoons of water and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch mixed together. Pour that in, let it simmer for a couple of minutes to thicken, and that should do ya. I will say, I said to leave it for 10 minutes, but it is actually true that beef stew is best on the second day. So if you are thinking ahead with this one, absolutely plan to make it the day before you want it. Like, make it on a Saturday afternoon, let it cool a bit, put it in the fridge, and then reheat it for your Sunday dinner. It is amazing how much better it gets. You know, the flavors really meld. The meat gets even more tender as it sits in that cooling liquid and then in the fridge overnight. And like, I don't know what it is. It gets like thicker. It's like more of the gelatin is coming from the meat and the sauce gets thicker. It's so good. So if you can make it the day ahead, make it the day ahead. If you don't make it the day ahead, maybe there will be leftovers and you'll get to try what I am talking about. And then either way, you can store this in the fridge in an airtight container for up to 4 days. And I guess the other thing I tell you is that you can make this in the slow cooker. As I said, it's not necessary to sear the beef before you start, but I do find it necessary to cook the onion a little bit. So I say saute the onion and then add the garlic to it, add the flour mixture to it. Like first dredge your meat in flour and then any that's left, add that to the onion and garlic, add the tomato paste in there, deglaze with a little bit of wine, and then put your beef pieces that were coated in flour into the slow cooker with that onion and wine mixture. Add in your broth and all the other ingredients, including the carrots and potatoes. Add them right in from the beginning. Give it a stir, then cover your slow cooker and cook it on low for 7 to 8 hours or on high for 5 hours. And that is going to work out. The instructions for doing it in the slow cooker are at the blog post, as well as the instructions that I told you about today. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for the podcast episode. And also you can find it at cookthestory.com/ROTD. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is February 26th of 2026. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, cookfor2.us, and from this podcast recipe of the day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.